Hello everyone, welcome to Easy English for Everyone. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like and share to receive the latest videos. Now let's study together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a story about a very determined boy. Harry studies anytime, anywhere. Many people want to learn new things, but sometimes they think they don't have enough time. What if learning could happen anywhere? Our story is about a young boy named Harry. Harry lived in a small town with his family. He was a curious boy who loved to learn. But life was busy. There were chores to do, friends to play with, and places to go. Still, Harry had a big goal. He wanted to become very smart and do well in school. One day, Harry had an idea. What if he used every little moment to study? He started reading on the bus, solving math problems while waiting in line, and listening to lessons while walking. Soon, Harry realized that learning didn't have to happen only in a classroom. It could happen anytime, anywhere. Let's find out about Harry's adventure in learning. We will read his story in chapters. Each chapter will be short and easy to understand. We will learn new words and see how Harry faces new challenges and exciting discoveries. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Old Book. Harry was a student. He went to school every day. But Harry did not like to study. Study is boring, Harry always said. He liked to play games and watch videos. One day, Harry was cleaning his house. He had to clean the attic. The attic was old and dusty. There were many old things in the attic. Harry found boxes, old toys, and clothes. In a corner, Harry saw a small, old book. The book was brown. It looked very old. Harry picked up the book. The cover was plain. There were only 2 words on the cover. The words were, "Studies everywhere." Studies everywhere? Harry read aloud. What is this book? Harry opened the book. The first page was empty. The second page was also empty. Harry turned more pages. All the pages were empty. This book is strange, Harry thought. It is an empty book. Suddenly, the book felt warm in Harry's hands. The words on the cover started to glow. Harry was surprised. He dropped the book on the floor. The book opened by itself. A bright light came from the book. Harry closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the light was gone. The book was normal again. Or was it? Harry picked up the book again. He looked at the empty pages. Then he thought about his English homework. He had to learn new words. He opened the book to a random page and thought, English words. Suddenly, words appeared on the page. They were English words. Words like apple, book, cat, and dog. Harry touched the words. They were real words, printed on the page. Wow, Harry said. This is magic. He thought again, math problems. He turned to another empty page. In a moment, math problems appeared. 1 plus 1 equals, 2 plus 2 equals, 3 times 3 is equal to? Harry was amazed. Harry understood. This was a magic book. It could show him anything he wanted to study. Studies everywhere, the cover said. Now Harry understood the name. He could study everywhere with this book. Harry smiled. Maybe study was not so boring now. With this magic book, studying could be fun. He closed the book and ran downstairs. He wanted to show his mom the magic book. His adventure with studies everywhere was just starting. Chapter 2. Kitchen Study Time. Harry ran to the kitchen. His mom was cooking dinner. The kitchen smelled good. Mom was making soup. Mom, look at this, Harry said. He showed his mom the old brown book. What is it, Harry? Mom asked. She was busy cutting vegetables. It's a magic book, Harry said. It can show me anything I want to study. Mom smiled. A magic book? That's nice, Harry. Now, can you help me with these carrots? But Mom, really? Look. Harry opened the book in the kitchen. He thought, science notes. In a flash, notes about science appeared in the book. Diagrams of plants and animals filled the pages. Mom looked at the book. She stopped cutting carrots. Oh, What is this? Mom asked, surprised. She looked at the pictures of plants. It's my magic book, Harry said proudly. See? Studies everywhere. Mom looked closer. Well, that is interesting, she said slowly. But Harry, maybe the kitchen is not the best place to study. It's dinner time soon. But Mom, it's studies everywhere. Harry said, I can study anywhere, even in the kitchen. Harry decided to test his magic book in the kitchen. He wanted to read his science notes while Mom cooked. He put the book on the kitchen table. He opened it to the science notes. Mom started to stir the soup in a big pot. Harry started to read about plants. But it was hard to focus. The kitchen was busy. Pots and pans were making noise. Mom was talking and singing while she cooked. Suddenly, Harry's science book started to get bigger. The pages grew larger and larger. The book became so big, it covered the whole kitchen table. Mom bumped into the giant book while stirring the soup. Oops. Sorry, book, Mom said, laughing a little. Harry tried to read his notes, but the giant book was in the way. It was hard to reach his soup bowl. It was hard to see Mom. The big book was taking over the kitchen. Then, Mom needed to put the hot soup on the table, but the giant book was there. There was no space for the soup. Harry, maybe your studies everywhere book is too much for the kitchen right now, Mom said, carefully trying to move the big book. Harry looked around. The kitchen was a mess of giant book pages and cooking pots. It was funny, but it was not very helpful for studying or for dinner. Okay, Mom, Harry said. He thought, normal size. The book quickly shrank back to its normal size. He closed the book. Maybe studies everywhere is not always a good idea, Harry said, smiling. The kitchen is for cooking, not giant books. Mom laughed. Yes, Harry. Sometimes, places have their own jobs. The kitchen is for cooking. Your room is for studying. And maybe magic books are best used in quiet places. Harry helped Mom put the soup on the table. He learned something new that day. Even magic had its limits. And maybe, just maybe, studying was better in some places than others. But he still had his magic book. And he was still excited to study everywhere else. Chapter 3. Park Adventures and Studying. The next day was sunny. I will study in the park, Harry thought. The park is a nice place. Fresh air, green trees. Studies everywhere will be perfect in the park. Harry took his magic book and went to the park. It was a busy park. Children were playing. Dogs were running. Birds were singing. It was a happy, noisy place. Harry found a bench under a big tree. He sat down and opened his magic book. History. Show me history, Harry thought. The book filled with pages about history. Kings and queens, old castles, and famous battles appeared in the book. Harry started to read about ancient Egypt, but the park was very distracting. A ball rolled near his bench. Children laughed and shouted. A dog barked loudly right next to him. Harry could not focus on ancient Egypt. Suddenly, as a group of children ran past, one of them bumped into Harry's bench. Harry dropped his magic book. It fell open on the grass, and then something funny happened. Because it was studies everywhere, the history notes started to spread out from the book. The pages floated off the book and onto the grass. Pictures of pyramids and pharaohs landed near the children playing ball. Wow! Look! Shouted a little girl. She picked up a page with a picture of a king. A king! Other children ran over. Soon, all the children were looking at Harry's history notes. They were more interested in the floating pages than in playing ball. Harry tried to gather his notes. Hey, those are mine, Harry said, trying to pick up the pages. But it was windy in the park. The pages blew away. Some pages flew into the trees. Some pages blew across the park path. The children started chasing the flying history notes. It became a game of catch the history pages. Harry ran after the children, trying to catch his notes. He was laughing. It was funny to see history pages flying around the park. But it was also not very good for studying. A dog, excited by all the running, started barking and chasing the pages too. Now it was children, Harry, and a dog all running around the park, chasing history notes. Finally, Harry managed to catch most of his pages. The children helped him. Even the dog tried to help by bringing a slightly chewed page back to Harry. Harry sat back on the bench, a little tired and a lot amused. His history notes were a bit crumpled and dog-smelly, but mostly okay. He closed his magic book. Park study time is interesting, Harry said to himself, smiling, but maybe a bit too much adventure. Studies everywhere. In the park means studies fly everywhere. He looked around the park. Children were going back to playing ball. The dog was sniffing a tree. The park was still noisy and busy. Harry realized the park was great for playing, for running, for fresh air. But for studying, maybe not so much. The park was full of fun, but not full of quiet study time. Harry decided to go home. He still liked his magic book. It was funny and surprising, but he was starting to learn that studies everywhere needed to be a little bit careful. Some places were just too everywhere for studying. He wondered where he should try studying next. Chapter 4. Supermarket Surprise Studies. Supermarket. I will study in the supermarket, Harry announced to his mom. Mom was making a shopping list. The supermarket, Harry? Why the supermarket? She asked, looking surprised. Because of studies everywhere, Harry said, holding up his magic book. I can study anywhere, even in the supermarket. Mom sighed. Harry, the supermarket is even busier than the park. There are people, carts, music, and lots of noise. Are you sure you want to study there? Yes. It will be an experiment, Harry said, excited. Supermarket Study Challenge. Mom shook her head, but she smiled. Okay, Harry. But if your magic book makes trouble in the supermarket, don't blame me. So, Harry went to the supermarket with his mom. He took his magic book with him. As soon as they entered the supermarket, it was loud and busy. Music was playing. People were talking. Shopping carts were rolling. Smells of food were everywhere. Harry opened his magic book. Math. Let's do math in the supermarket, he thought. Immediately, pages of math problems filled the book. Harry tried to focus on a problem about apples and oranges, but it was hard. Everything around him was moving and noisy. Mom was picking out fruits and vegetables. Harry followed her, trying to read his math problems. He walked past colorful fruits, rows of vegetables, and stacks of cans. Suddenly, as Mom reached for a bag of oranges, Harry's magic book started to react to the supermarket. Because he was studying math problems about apples and oranges started appearing from his book. Small, cartoon apples and oranges popped out of the pages. They were not real fruit, but little paper cutouts of apples and oranges. At first, just a few. Then, more and more. Little paper apples and oranges floated around Harry and Mom. What's happening? Mom asked, looking around at the floating paper fruit. Harry looked at his book. It was still showing math problems, but now it was also making paper fruit. Oops, Harry said. I think studies everywhere is getting confused by the supermarket fruits. The paper apples and oranges started landing in the real fruit displays. Paper apples landed on top of real apples. Paper oranges mixed with real oranges. It was getting hard to tell which were real and which were paper. Other shoppers started to notice the strange paper fruit. They looked confused. Some people picked up the paper fruit, thinking it was real. Then they looked surprised when they realized it was just paper. A supermarket worker came over. He looked at the paper fruit mixed with the real fruit. He looked at Harry and Mom. He looked very confused. Excuse me, the worker said to Mom. What are these paper fruits? Mom tried to explain. It's Harry's magic book, she said, a little embarrassed. He's studying. Studies everywhere, you know. The worker looked even more confused. Magic book? Paper fruit? In the fruit section? Harry quickly thought. Stop the fruit. Just normal book again. The magic book stopped making paper fruit. The floating paper apples and oranges slowly disappeared. The book became normal again. Mom quickly helped Harry gather the paper fruit that had landed on the floor. They put the paper fruit in Harry's bag. The supermarket worker was still looking at them strangely. We should probably go now, Mom said to Harry quickly. She put the carrots and oranges in the shopping cart. They hurried to the checkout and left the supermarket as fast as they could. Outside, Mom sighed. Harry, the supermarket is definitely not a good place for studies everywhere, she said, laughing a little. Paper fruit in the fruit section. That was surprising. Harry laughed too. Supermarket study challenge. Failed, he said, but it was funny. Studies everywhere makes supermarkets very fruity. Mom smiled. Yes, very fruity. But maybe next time we try studying somewhere a little less everywhere. Like maybe your room. Harry thought about it. Maybe Mom was right. Studies everywhere was fun and exciting, but maybe some places were just too much for magic study books. He was still learning how to use his book, and he was still ready for more study adventures, just maybe in a quieter place next time. Chapter 5. Bus Stop and Bus Ride Studies. Harry had an idea. I will study on the bus, he announced one morning. Mom was making breakfast. On the bus, Harry? That's a new one, she said, flipping pancakes. Why the bus? Because I take the bus to school every day. Harry explained. It's a good time to study. Studies everywhere on the bus. Mom thought for a moment. Well, she said, the bus might be less fruity than the supermarket, and maybe less flying than the park. Okay, Harry, try studying on the bus. But be careful. Don't let your magic book cause trouble on the bus. I won't, Mom. Harry promised. He took his magic book and went to the bus stop. Other students were waiting for the bus. It was a bit crowded at the bus stop. When the bus arrived, everyone got on. Harry found a seat by the window. He opened his magic book. Geography. Show me geography, Harry thought. The book filled with maps and pictures of different countries. Harry started to look at a map of Vietnam. He wanted to learn about his country. The bus started to move. It was a bit bumpy. Harry tried to hold his book steady. It was hard to read while the bus was moving up and down. Suddenly, because it was studies everywhere, the maps in Harry's book started to become real. Not real like paper fruit, but real like 3D. The map of Vietnam popped up from the book. It became a small, 3D model of Vietnam, right in front of Harry. It was amazing. Harry could see the mountains, the rivers, and the cities of Vietnam in 3D. He could even see tiny paper trees and paper buildings on the map. But the 3D map was a bit big, and the bus was crowded. Harry's 3D map was taking up space. The girl sitting next to Harry looked surprised. She had to lean away from the big 3D map. Harry felt embarrassed. It's, my magic book, Harry mumbled. I was studying. Studies everywhere, you know. Oops, sorry. Harry whispered to the girl. He tried to make the 3D map smaller, but it was still quite large. Then, the bus went over a big bump. Harry's 3D map bounced up and down. Some of the tiny paper trees and buildings fell off the map and onto the floor of the bus. Oh no, Harry said quietly. He tried to pick up the tiny paper trees and buildings, but they were very small, and the bus floor was not very clean. Other passengers started to notice the tiny paper trees and buildings on the bus floor. They looked confused. One man almost stepped on a tiny paper pagoda. The bus driver looked in his mirror. He saw Harry and the 3D map. He saw the tiny paper things on the floor. He looked a little annoyed. At the next bus stop, the bus driver stopped the bus. He turned to Harry. Hey, kid, the driver said. What's all this stuff on the floor? Harry felt embarrassed. It's, my magic book, Harry mumbled. I was studying. Studies everywhere, you know. The bus driver looked even more confused. Magic book? 3D map? Paper trees on my bus. Harry quickly thought. Flat map. Normal book again. The 3D map flattened back into a normal map in the book. The tiny paper trees and buildings disappeared. The book became normal again. Harry quickly picked up the few paper trees and buildings that were still on the bus floor. He put them back in his bag. He closed his magic book. Sorry, Harry said to the bus driver quietly. The bus driver sighed. Look, kid, he said. Buses are for getting to school, not for magic shows. Keep your magic to yourself on the bus, okay? Okay, Harry said, feeling a little ashamed. The bus driver started driving again. Harry sat quietly, looking out the window. He kept his magic book closed. He learned another lesson about studies everywhere. Buses were for riding, not for 3D maps and paper trees. Maybe some places were just too public for magic study books. When Harry got to school, he kept his magic book in his bag. He decided to study in class, like normal students. Maybe studies everywhere was better for everywhere else except for kitchens, parks, supermarkets, and buses. He still had one more place to try. A place that was very important for students. A place called the school play. Chapter 6. Stage Fright Studies. Today was a special day at Harry's school. It was the day of the school play. Harry's class was performing Little Red Riding Hood. Harry was playing the part of the woodsman. He had a small part, but he was still nervous. Backstage, it was very busy. Students were getting dressed in costumes. Teachers were helping with makeup. Everyone was excited and a little bit stressed. Harry was waiting for his turn to go on stage. He was wearing his woodsman costume. He had a fake beard and a toy axe. He was supposed to chop down a tree in the play, but Harry was also worried about a test he had next week. It was a big science test. He needed to study, but backstage was too noisy to focus. Then, Harry remembered his magic book. Of course, studies everywhere, to the rescue. Harry thought, I can study backstage, even with all the noise. Harry found a quiet corner backstage. He sat down and opened his magic book. Science test. Show me science test study guide. Harry thought, the book filled with pages about science. Diagrams of cells, charts of elements, and notes about experiments appeared in the book. Harry started to read about the water cycle, but backstage was still a bit distracting. People were running around. Music was playing loudly from the stage. Harry tried to concentrate on the water cycle, but it was hard. Suddenly, as Harry was reading about evaporation, his magic book started to react to the school play. Because the play was Little Red Riding Hood, and because Harry was studying science, things from both the play and his science notes started to mix together. First, a small, cartoon wolf popped out of the book. It was a paper wolf, like the paper fruit from the supermarket, but this wolf was wearing a Little Red Riding Hood costume. It was a funny sight. Then, more paper animals started popping out of the book. Paper trees, like the ones from the bus map, grew up around Harry. Paper clouds, like from the water cycle diagrams, floated in the air above him. Backstage was turning into a mix of a forest, a science lab, and a fairy tale. Other students backstage started to notice the strange things happening around Harry. They stopped getting dressed and stared. Even some of the teachers looked surprised. The music from the stage was getting louder. It was almost Harry's turn to go on stage as the woodsman, but backstage was now filled with paper animals, paper trees, and paper clouds. It was chaos. Then, the stage manager called out, "Woodsman, woodsman, to the stage." It was Harry's turn. Harry panicked. He was still surrounded by paper science fairy tale chaos. He quickly thought, stop the magic. Normal book. Normal backstage. The magic book stopped making paper things. The paper animals, trees, and clouds slowly disappeared. The book became normal again, but it was too late. Some of the paper trees and animals had already floated onto the stage. Right in the middle of the Little Red Riding Hood play, the actors on stage looked surprised. The audience started to giggle. There were paper trees and paper wolves appearing on stage during Little Red Riding Hood. It was not part of the play. Harry, still in his woodsman costume, had to go on stage. He walked onto the stage, past the surprised actors, and past the strange paper trees and animals. The audience was laughing and pointing. Harry felt very embarrassed. His Studies Everywhere book had ruined the school play. He was supposed to be a serious woodsman, but now he was the magic book woodsman who made paper animals appear on stage. He did his woodsman part as quickly as he could. He chopped down the fake tree with his toy axe. Then he ran off stage as fast as possible. He just wanted to hide. Backstage, everyone was talking about what happened. Some students were laughing. Some teachers were shaking their heads. The stage manager looked very stressed. Harry felt terrible. He had tried to study everywhere, and everywhere he studied, he made trouble. Kitchens, parks, supermarkets, buses, and now even the school play. Studies Everywhere was turning into trouble everywhere. Harry closed his magic book tightly. Maybe, just maybe, Studies Everywhere was not such a good idea after all. Maybe there was a reason why people usually studied in quiet rooms, not in busy, noisy, everywhere places. He had a magic book that could show him anything. But maybe magic was not the answer to everything. Maybe sometimes normal was better. He needed to think about what he had learned. And maybe, just maybe, he needed to learn how to study normally. Chapter 7. The Real Lesson. After the school play disaster, Harry felt sad. His Studies Everywhere book was not making studying fun anymore. It was making trouble. Everywhere he tried to study, something went wrong. He sat in his room, looking at the magic book. He opened it to a blank page. He didn't think science or math or history. He just thought, help. Suddenly, words appeared in the book. But these were not study notes. These were different words. The words were, Dear Harry, magic is fun, but it is not everything. Studies Everywhere is a gift, but it is also a tool. Like any tool, it must be used wisely. You can study everywhere, but should you study everywhere? Think about it. Is the kitchen good for cooking? Is the park good for playing? Is the supermarket good for shopping? Yes. Are these places good for quiet study? Maybe not always. Sometimes, the best place to study is a quiet place, a place where you can focus. A place like your room. Studies Everywhere can help you learn anywhere, but it is up to you to choose the right time and the right place. Magic is not a replacement for thinking. It is a helper. Think about what you have learned. Think about where you study best, and then use your magic wisely. Your friend, the magic book. Harry read the words slowly. He understood. The magic book was not telling him to stop studying everywhere. It was telling him to be smart about it. Studies Everywhere was not about studying all the time, in every place, no matter what. It was about having the ability to study anywhere, when it was helpful. Harry looked around his room. It was quiet. It was calm. It was his study space. Maybe his mom was right. Maybe some places were just better for certain things. The kitchen for cooking, the park for playing, his room for studying. Harry smiled. He had learned a real lesson, not from a science book or a history book, but from his magic book itself. The lesson was, magic is cool, but common sense is cooler. Studies Everywhere is amazing, but studies in the right place at the right time is even better. Harry closed his magic book. He put it on his desk. He looked at his science test study guide. He opened his normal notebook. He sat at his desk in his quiet room. He started to study. Normally, it was quiet. It was peaceful. He could focus. He could learn. It was actually quite nice. Maybe studying in his room was not so boring after all. especially after all the crazy studies everywhere adventures. From that day on, Harry still used his magic book sometimes. If he was waiting for the bus, he might quickly check some history facts. If he was in the park and wanted to learn a new English word, he could use his book. Studies everywhere was still useful, sometimes, but Harry also learned to study normally. He studied in his room. He studied at his desk. He learned that sometimes the best magic is not magic at all. Sometimes the best way to learn is just to sit down, focus, and study in a quiet place. And sometimes, after a good study session in his room, Harry would take his magic book to the park, not to study history and make pages fly away, but to sit under a tree, read a funny story in his magic book, and just enjoy the magic of a quiet moment in a busy world. Because even studies everywhere knew sometimes the best place to be was just somewhere peaceful. And maybe, just maybe, everywhere included his own room, after all.